Happy New Year, everyone. It's the first webcast I've done this year, so I don't know if it's the first one you've attended, but it's the first one I've done. So glad to be kicking it off with a kind of interesting topic that we have here with the different point upgrades that we have within Vault. So I've got my pink grapefruit LaCroix at my hand here. I've got Vault all queued up, and we should be good to go. So just before we get into it, like we usually do, we talk just a little bit about IMAGINiT, who we are and what we do. And that right at the top of that circle is what we're talking a little bit about today, the idea of technology solutions and kind of the virtuous circle that we see with IMAGINiT, where we start out with understanding what technology solutions work best for your company. We work with our professional services to optimize them and then continue that productivity through training and support as we move forward with that. IMAGINiT, one of the things, we're part of a larger company, and I've really enjoyed this throughout the years because we provide the Autodesk software, we work with the Geosystems, we do professional services, we do training, different things like that. We've got another sister company that works on the Dassault products and Dassault and PCC training. And if you've taken an AutoCAD class in the past 20 years, you might have used Ascent products. So any Autodesk class, we write a lot of training materials, or Ascent writes a lot of training materials for Autodesk, PTC, and Dassault software. And it's great being part of this larger group like this, particularly with Ascent. We get to influence a lot of what those classes look like and what material goes into those. These are our offices across North America. So this is, we cover a lot of area. What I always tell clients when I'm talking about our professional services and things like that is what all these dots mean to you is such a depth of resources. I've got 6 guys that report to me who do implementations, training, support, all those things, and then I have several peers throughout North America. So we've got a pretty deep team that can provide a very, very wide range of services and brings a lot of knowledge to the game. So this is a big part of what we do. The professional services is the part of the company where I work, particularly in the consulting and what we're looking at today, data and product lifecycle management. So that idea of data management, of course, is what it's all about with the Vault. And whether it's implementing or looking to automate some processes with different things like that, that's definitely something we can work with. And then we do go beyond that with the CFD, reality capture, facilities management. And then that idea of productivity, making sure everybody's up to speed, our live online classes, and our productivity now. Some great ways to continue your education. It's always great to hit these sorts of webcasts that we do, but we're just kind of scratching the surface. If you really want to dig deep into those, we would look at either consulting on a particular topic or just training as we would go through the other pieces. One thing I was talking with the company yesterday is a lot of times I'll go somewhere and they say, hey, AutoCAD is here, or the AutoCAD guy is here. And really it's Autodesk, and we've got a deep relationship with them, but we're not Autodesk. Autodesk creates the software. They're the ones who actually do it, but our relationship with them is that we help provide those to customers as a reseller. We have the largest authorized training center in North America. We're one of the largest partners for that. And we're a publisher for their materials. And what we bring is implementation technologies, that idea of support systems, and really award-winning customer satisfaction. We're always trying to see what we can do to extend customer satisfaction. So that is us. And again, my name's Caleb Funk, and if you've been on a webcast with me, I kind of like to jump right into it. And that's what I want to do today. So the idea of today is looking at Vault. And we're looking at 2020.2, and 2020.2 actually released on December 20th. So it was when we first put this webcast together, Cassie and I were kind of talking through some different things, and we said, yeah, let's do it. And it was really all off of 2020.1. So 2020.2, I'm including that in this, even though it wasn't some of the tools from it weren't listed in the invite, because it's a pretty cool tool. And I'll point that out here in a little bit when we get to it. We're kind of talking through that. But one thing I wanted to point out is that more than half of the feature improvements for Vault 2020.2 came from user ideas. And this has been great in my mind. You'll see this a lot as Autodesk has releases and they point things out. They'll say, hey, this was a user enhancement, user-suggested enhancement. So if you have an idea add it. And the way you can do that is through the Autodesk forums. Specifically, it's the Vault Ideas. And I've got the link there. You don't have to write that down. We could provide it another way, or just Google it. Just Google Vault Ideas, Autodesk forums, and you'll find it really quickly. But you can submit an idea, and that is reviewed pretty consistently by the developers. And they'll go through and take a look at that. They even review previous ideas and look at things that happened in the past to determine if it makes sense to include something there, from past content. And I have customers who will ask me, they'll say, hey, Caleb, I've got this great idea for Vault. Do you have any sway with Autodesk? And the answer is none more than you do. If what I would do is take that and add it to the Vault Ideas forum, and you can take that and add it to the Vault Ideas forum. And that's really what we're trying to do, is make sure that we can curate that and get that information to them. This is a direct pipeline. So if you've got an idea, don't waste it on me. I would drop it right in here and talk to them. So 2020.2, let's talk a couple of things, and this just comes from the my work in professional services and the different upgrades and things that I've been involved with. This is an upgrade. So these are, you can download the 2020.2, that's hard to say, update for the server and for the client. So there's two different pieces to that. You would download both of them, do the server first, and backup. It's an upgrade. It's a minimal one, but it's an upgrade. The installer is really simple. I mean, it's just a click-and-go installer. But what will happen is once you upgrade the server, it does require database migration. All that means is you open the server. Once you open it up, it'll tell you, hey, the server, I need to migrate this database. Should I go forward with that? And you can say yes. But you would put on the server, then you upgrade the clients, and that's where we're going to get the additional functionality. This course is only available to people who are in our subscription model, who are on the Autodesk website. You're going to get it right here. I've got that's just a little screenshot right from manage.autodesk.com where we go to get those things. The client does have to be put on every workstation that's going to be accessing it. So you update the server, update the client, and it goes. Now you'll notice that it says this is an update for basic, workgroup, and professional. So it does affect all of them. However, certain tools that we have really only work with workgroup and professional. So while the update does update all of them, there are certain things that only would affect workgroup and professional, including the kind of one of the bigger ones that I'll mention here. So think of this as an upgrade. This isn't just a simple little point release. Even though the install is pretty easy, you do want to back this up so that you can have all this information on there. So definitely be aware of that. Okay, so these are the enhancements. And this is just a list. I am not going to talk through each point in this list. I'm going to show more of this and get into it. But the thing that struck me is that so many of these enhancements are very, very user-based. What I've seen in the past, and Vault 2020 was an example of this, it was like an admin release. I mentioned this, I think, if you were part of a webcast when I talked about Vault 2020, it was like an admin's release. Man, there's so many things we can do at the administrator level that users would never see, worry about, and the admin might only do it once or twice, but it was very useful. Well, what we saw with these updates is there's very little admin that's part of this. The administrative side isn't a thing. What it's really about is dealing with the user side of things. And there's several pieces in here that are very much how users would want to access, how users work with things, just little things within here. Remembering the last visited folder when you close and restart the client. Straightforward. It's one of those things we run into, and it's painful when it doesn't work, basically. And now we've got access to do that, so that you can get in and see some of that information. So I'll point some of these out here. I'm going to hit most of these. I've got slides just for a few of the highlight moments of it, and we'll kind of start with one of those. And this one's really interesting. We can now change how Vault handles opening DWG files. And it's not just DWG. It's really Inventor files, Revit files, and it mentions AutoCAD, but really we want to look at AutoCAD files because this has been a difficulty that I've seen at different locations, whether it's working with older versions of DWG, whether it is working with, we've got some AutoCAD electrical, we've got some AutoCAD mechanical, we've got base AutoCAD. We're also doing Inventor DWGs. What do we want to handle this? How do we handle this information? So while this is true of, it's going to work with the Inventor tools, it's really AutoCAD is what it comes down to. So we can tell it to open the latest version. Okay, ignore anything else, just open the latest version. And it is aware of whether it was saved. It still understands. There's the provider aspect. So it knows if it's an electrical drawing now. It's aware if it's an AutoCAD mechanical drawing. It's aware if it's an Inventor DWG. So I could say just open in the latest version of the software or the saved version. So if I had opened that for whatever reason in AutoCAD Electrical 2018, I still want it to open in AutoCAD Electrical 2018. Right? I want it to open in the saved version if possible. That's what it'd be looking for. And default uses that launcher. It just uses whatever the default settings are and uses the launcher. And this is done through Vault. Well, we kind of could do this before, but we had to go in and set it up via the Windows mappings and kind of work with those different pieces as we would go through. So this is really kind of nice because it's going to really be able to work with that and hold us there. So I'll take a look at that one. Another one I want to take a look at is the idea of the force overwrite. When I get a file, we have the option now to force overwrite. So if I'm getting a single file, this isn't nearly as big a deal. If I'm getting an assembly, the assembly would say, oh, those parts of this assembly are already on your hard drive. You don't need those. I wouldn't have to specifically go get those. So I could have out-of-date files on my hard drive. Well, now I can choose this force overwrite, and this is a sticky. It's going to stay there. So no matter what, it's staying force overwrite. We're not moving off of it. It's really kind of it's a simple addition, but it's a nice one. It's always going to overwrite the data that I have on my hard drive with data from the Vault. We can pull that specifically. Another nice one, and this kind of gets to on the Inventor side, but I now have a folder view within Inventor to go look for these files. So instead of digging through just by clicking in the pane at the right, I will now have a folder view to see some of this. And I want to stop right here, and I want to walk through some of this. So I'm going to just share my screen, and I'm going to pull up my Vault. I think I am. There we go. Perfect. So I want to talk through some of those little options that we have, kind of where they are and how we can address them. And one of the first ones I mentioned was the idea of being able to change the file open settings. So I now have a new option within here, and it says Open File Behavior Settings, and I can go over here to my settings, and I can now tell it what do I want to have happen. So for Inventor, do I just want the last run version? Do I want to use whatever default is mapped to it? Okay, so that would be if I'm running a couple of different versions. How do I want this to open up? Again, I've got the latest version, saved by version, and default that I can trigger that to open with. Revit does kind of the same thing, latest, saved by default. I do not use Revit within Vault a whole lot, but that would be an example of that. And then for default, which would be just any other file type except for these, all we have is default. It's just using the default opener for that. But you can go in and make those changes so that it's opening how you would expect it to. And usually this is one of those you're not going to mess with every day. You're going to set it once, and that's going to be it, and you're going to move on. But I have had several instances where as we've that AutoCAD launcher, they call it, Autodesk Launcher, seems to pick the wrong one. It's kind of nice that we can force it now within here to pick some specific ones that we have. And also, I don't know if this was added. I can honestly say I do not know. Maybe it was here all along in my options. But you notice you can determine what setting you want for viewing Inventor files, whether it's Inventor View or Inventor Read Only. Inventor Read Only is great. It's a great tool for viewing those files, and that's probably my preference right now. So that's one of the big pieces that I have right there that I wanted to show. Just the idea of how we can access some of that information and see some of that. Another one, and I went by this pretty quickly earlier, I had pointed it out, but I just kind of jumped right through it, is the idea of multi-line text. And you can see here in my comments it says this is one line over here at the right. So I'm pointing out, but if I rest on it, that is actually multi-line text. I just kept hitting enter as I was going through. And now I've got this idea of multi-line text in my fields where I can go in, and if I go in and edit that particular property, I've got to tell it to edit that selected property, excuse me. If we take a look at that, I'll be able to see that, I got to just get in here. This is multiple lines of text that's part of that. And I can continue to add text to that. It'll go through and do the update. So the first one still shows there, but now I can see there's multiple lines of text within a single property. And this was something that I had not attempted before. We could just kind of space it out. We could have multiple things, but it all was one big line. Now, and I'm just hitting enter, I can have multiple lines of text and easily read them through there for that particular property. So that's a really, really useful tool that we have as part of that. Okay, I want to jump back to my list here just for a second of the different components that we had. So I mentioned the multi-line text that we had. A couple of the others, remembering the selected item and remembering or retaining the last folder visited. I want to point those out here real quick as well. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. So I don't know if I might have a few items here. Okay, so I've got an item, and this was something, if you've ever used items, if you happen to hit refresh, it would just take you back to the top. This is now persistent. Whatever one I have selected, even when I refresh, it keeps that one selected. The other thing, if you're not using items, and I'll go down here and look at this RCCF main. So I'm looking at that folder, RCCF main. That's the folder I'm working in. And I close my Vault client. Well, of course, and if you've used Vault for a while, you're very familiar. Once you go back into it, it just takes you back to the top, and you have to dig down. And I'm like, no worries, shortcuts are very important. And shortcuts are still important. And we can continue to use the shortcuts the same way we did before, except now, Vault remembers what folder I was in, and it's looking right at it. Such a simple little idea, but incredibly powerful. This is how I would assume it would work. And when I'm doing implementations, training, working with people, that's what I'll hear a lot of times. Like, well, I just assumed it did that. I would agree. That's what we would expect. You know, that's kind of my thought as well. Vault didn't, though. It would just dip you right back up to here, and you got to figure out how you're going to get back to where you need to go and dig down through. That's why shortcuts were so important, but now it will remember. It does retain that information. The other thing I'll show that's part of this update while I'm here, and again, this is very user-based, is if I go in here to my Find, and I'm going to go ahead and search, I'll just say Material Contains, and I'm just going to put a star, right? This is just, I'll just do a quick find whatever, goes and finds a bunch of stuff. That all sounds good. And as I look at this now, there's a lot to look at. There's 248. I can scroll through. I can now make this full screen. And while that's such a simple addition, just that one little click right there, and it's standard Windows behavior, I now have so much more room to look at this, more areas to work with. You know, the idea of adding fields in makes more sense, and I can begin searching better, understanding, and I can just shut that box down. That, by the way, is not persistent. So the next time I go back, it's the normal size box, but I can make that box, I can maximize it and make it full screen. So it's the little things that make me happy, and that definitely does. Okay, so this is everything. These are a bunch of the things that were added inside of Vault itself. And, of course, the core remains the same, but the ability to maintain those folders, do that search, those types of things, just enhances what we have. Another big enhancement actually happens over in Inventor. So here I am within Inventor, and I'm going to go to Vault, and I'm going to say Open. And I pointed this out in one of my slides, but I want to really point it out here. What I would typically do is I would start digging down, right? Masonite, that's the wrong folder. I want to go over here to this RCCF main, and then I can dig down from there. And that worked, right? And I can see my history of how I got to that point. And this is exactly what I would show people for a very long time. This is how we go through, and we can search. Again, this is why I would tell people that's why using your shortcuts are so important, because I could have shortcuts pointing to all of those different things and easily find them. Now, however, I have a folder view, and it's just the tab right here. I could do the advanced, which is what we would typically see, and then we have the folder view. When I switch to folder view, I can see all of those items right there. I can very quickly just navigate down to which folder I want to, take a look at the information that's there, very, very quickly move through all of the information that's part of that. Expand the subfolders if there are any, look at all what's there, and on and on. What a great addition. And to me, this falls into there's always two types of updates for me. When I see feature updates, one of them is typically, yeah, that's great, what a great idea, and the other one is, man, about time. And this falls into the about time category. The fact that I can now access this through here and go and see this information, tremendous time saver right there. That is worth the cost of admission. That's worth the upgrade, is just getting this enhancement as part of that. So definitely powerful. I'd highly recommend. So I mentioned the idea of opening the files, the force overwrite that we have, the view to open, and then that was really where I was going to focus on for the 20.1. And then on December 20th, we got a Christmas present, which was duplicate search. And so 20.2 is available now with this, and we've got this additional information, additional tools. This is a pretty good set of tools that they've added to this. We had a duplicate search in Vault before, but duplicate search would just search for file names. It says, hey, you've got 10 part 1s. And that was a big part of what it did. It would just give us a list of what parts were duplicated, and then we could go search on that. What we have now is we're not just searching on the file names. We're not just looking at that. It's expanding out where we're going to look at geometry. And it's for real. It will search to see if you have components that are exactly the same. If you have built the same bracket 3 times, it's going to find it and locate that information. So basically, if the part files have exactly the same geometry, they're going to be considered duplicates. So mirrored parts get caught up in this. You're probably always going to have some duplicates, because mirrored parts are going to be considered duplicate information because they contain exactly the same geometry. It might be in a different attitude. It might be in a different, it's shifted to the other side, but it's the same geometry. So I don't know how it does this, to be honest. I remember seeing some information that Autodesk had shared about conceptually, but really it's going deeper. It's looking at not just volume. It's not just looking at the part tree, but it's looking at the geometry. And parts that have the same geometry are considered duplicate. If they have the same geometry but different properties, they're still considered duplicate. So if I had a flange that was aluminum and a flange that was brass and another flange that is nylon, but they're all a 10-inch flange with 6 holes, it's the same. It'll find that. So most likely you will always have some percentage of duplicate geometry. as defined by the duplicate search. But what we want to take a look at is we can review and make sure that that's what we want. And that's one of the keys. This gives us a better handle on what we want to have with this. So there is a duplicates dashboard inside of Vault, and I'll pull this up, that gives you an understanding of how many duplicates you have, where this information is, and how we can get to that, and all these different pieces. And we'll see how we can search for those duplicates from Inventor. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to go to my Vault. So, step one, and you have to be at administrator level to do this, but one thing you can do under the Vault settings is you can specify which folders you want to search duplicate parts for. This is a way that you could filter this information. So, for example, I've set this up already. I'm just looking in my Designs folder. I'm not looking through my Content Center right now. I can determine whether I want to include that. Subfolders are automatically included. Duplicate search is enabled. I'm going to go find the duplicates based off of that. That's part of this. Okay. So that does have to be set up by an administrator before we get anywhere else with the duplicate search. Once that's done, a job will be sent to the job processor to begin the duplicate search. And what happens is it indexes the information. So it will go through and index the files that are in there so we can do that. I mentioned that while this update is for Vault Basic, Vault Workgroup, and Vault Professional, not all the tools will work with Vault Basic. This is one of them. The duplicate search is not part of Vault Basic because Vault Basic doesn't have a job processor. So it uses job processor, and when I first did this, I had a less than 200 components, and the duplicate my indexing was done minutes. I mean, it was very, very quickly that it went through. Obviously, if you have a very large vault, that'll take some time to index that. But even with 200 components, it didn't look like it's not like it was opening every single one and spending 5 minutes per. I mean, it was seconds that it went through with that. Later, I put in, as I was adding information in later, and I had to look this up, how does it index information that I'm adding later? And it uses the job processor again. It's going to kick it off. It's going to go find the information and index that. So you'll see, you won't see it as soon as you added it. There may be a lag, but we can find that. Okay? So it will index the information, find it, and then that gives me my duplicates dashboard. And this is, both down here as my list of items I have, or it's up here in my list. So it's my duplicates dashboard. So out of 198 total parts in my vault, I have indexed 147 of them, and I have a 10% duplicate ratio. This number, if every part I had was mirrored, I guess that could realistically be at 50%, right? But the idea is I've got a sense, just as a dashboard, of I've got 15 duplicates of 7 unique shapes. So it's looking at a lot of information here. Now, this, while it gives me a sense of what I'm looking at, this doesn't really go deep enough for me to understand what's going on. So up here in the corner is this ellipsis, and I can view the duplicates report. And this report now is going to go through, and it gives me a little better sense of, for group 1, so this is one type of thing, I've got, actually I'll start down here at group 7, so I've got a support bar. Here's its part number. Looks like I just did a copy of it. So it's just a straight up copy of that one. This is used in one file. This is used in one file. Shows me the description, the date it was checked in, the material, administrator. Here's an example where I've got a couple of pins. Their names are slightly different. Their geometry is the same. So in this case, whether I made a copy of it or whether I moved it around, I've got 2 pins with the geometry being the same, however their file names are different. Again, I've got a copy with this one. That looks like a copy that I have there. This I thought was interesting because I see this all the time, and I'm sure you guys do too. It's a 3-inch standard nylon lock nut. Great. File name here includes UNC 3-8. File name here does not. You know, what are we, is exactly the same information. Now in this case, what it looks like to me is this very well may be an iPart factory that I'm working with or something. So, but it's something to review. And this is the type of thing you run into. It's a bracket, and oh shoot, that other bracket looks exactly the same. And in this case, we've got a mirrored one, a pitch control arm, and a pitch control arm, so we can see, you know, where that's at. And in this group 1, I was just kind of playing around. This is just a cube I created, so it's not part of any files. But I created a cube. It's a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. I put it into 3 different folders. I named it 3 different things. And, you know, in one case I gave it, you know, I just tried to think of how I could do this, and it found that geometry perfectly. And the moments after I had put this in, the job processor ran, and this showed up in my duplicates report. So now I have this idea of duplicate geometry. I can see the names of it. I can see where it's at. I now have a better understanding of how my vault, the duplicate information that's in my vault. So that's great. Yeah, that works really well, actually. But one thing that I want to do is I want to take this just a little bit further, and I'm going to see this guy right here. It's this little weldment that I have. I'm going to open this up. So I'll open this weldment up within Inventor, and this is just a real small weldment. I've just got some pieces on here. It's great that I can search for that inside of Vault, and I can get a sense of that information and see what's there, but that may not be everything that I'm looking for, right? That gives me that first level. Here within Inventor, if I take a look at my Vault tab, and I'm logged in, perfect, I have a Find Duplicates tool right within Inventor. And so what it does, it's going to search for geometrically duplicate files. And I can even go here, I can pick a particular component. I'm just going to select this one, and I'm going to search. And sure enough, I do have a duplicate of that, which is just a copy of. I've made a copy of this support bar at one point. And what about this guy? Well, I know I do because I created I created it specifically. But I'll go search, and sure enough, I've got a copy of that particular plate. It's used in another file. I can see that. And if I want to, I can replace it right from here. I can go through, select it, and say, you know what, we're just going to replace one with the other. And it takes that and it replaces all the occurrences of that particular component, one with the other, right from this dialog box. So it went into Vault, grabbed the geometrically similar component, and pulled it out. So not only do we have this report that we can run on all of this, but we've got a way that we can search for that information and extract it using this geometric tool. This, of course, is one of these floating palettes, right? So I can dock it over here if I wanted to. I can move it around, whatever I want to do. I like it floating, just so I can resize it and kind of see some of the information that's going on. It's probably my preference right now, but it allows me to search through the file, find the duplicate information, and bring that in. To me, as a point release, I'm kind of surprised it was a point release. This is a major tool for working within your Vault, for keeping your Vault clean, for keeping things up to date, for understanding what do we have that's out there. Because I've had several customers say, great, you know, the file names, we've named it, you know, who knows what it's named, but how many of those are actually out there? How many times did we create that component? And there was no way of understanding that, because all we could do is search on file names. Now, using this background information, this how it's indexing this information, it's searching on the geometry and finding the geometry for that. Fantastic tool. This is such a great move forward, and I was really excited because we had this webcast planned anyway, and now I get to play with it and talk about it and show it off leading up to that. So it came out, like I said, last month, and it's a great reason to update to that particular tool. So taking a look at that, this is very user-centric. All these tools are really about bringing, adding to the user experience, whether it is the searching for those duplicates, whether it is just remembering which folder I was in last, or being able to go in through Inventor and dig through my folders that way. All of those are very user-centric tools, and this is very much a user-based point release that we have as part of that. It's a great value add to the tool that was already very powerful. Now it just becomes easier to use all around.